Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Salon on how to harness energy from raw municipal wastewater. This is Michael Schenk with Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, and we're here today to talk with three of our member cities, Toronto, Vancouver, and Helsinki, about the work they're doing in this respective space. So how we're going to do the run of show is we'll have Toronto speak first, followed by Vancouver, followed by Helsinki, and after each presentation, if questions come up, please feel free to raise your hand or put them in chat, and we'll have an informal conversation. That's why we intended this to be a salon, informal conversation. We are recording this conversation so that we can share it out later on social media, so that we can continue the conversation on LinkedIn, etc. So without further ado, let's begin. And we're going to turn it over to Fernando from Toronto, who's manager of the Environment and Climate Division with the City of Toronto. Toronto boasts the world's largest raw wastewater energy project under construction. So there's lots to talk about in Toronto, one of our leading members in the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance. So Fernando, over to you. And we still have you on mute, just so you know.
Okay, can you see the slides there?
We can, yes, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Michael. Actually, really excited to be here talking about wastewater, which is really a great tool that we have, which has been around for a long time, but it's gaining actually a lot of traction. Think of it actually essentially as geothermal, but instead of having to drill wells, which is expensive, you can actually tap into a sewer. So it's dependent actually obviously on proximity to a large sewer. But as I'll tell you, in 2 seconds, I guess, we're decarbonizing basically an entire hospital campus, and their natural gas consumption will go down to almost nothing. So it's quite exciting. Before that, actually, not to assume that people know what Toronto is about. Toronto actually is the largest city in Canada. We're located in province of Ontario, just sort of north of New York State. And it's home, to about 3 million people. And we consistently place actually at the top international rankings. And love if you're in the area, make a point to come and visit. Just to set the stage, why are we doing wastewater and how does it fit? Given that I'm from the climate division, we take a climate view on wastewater. So the idea actually is that Toronto actually has committed, cities around the world, and particularly Carbon Neutral City Alliance members, to get to net zero. In our case, actually, we're aiming to be net zero by 2040. And as you can see from this graph, buildings are the largest single source of emissions. So decarbonizing buildings, decarbonizing large hospital and education campuses and government cluster of buildings is essentially a necessary feat. We drive the policy Transfrontier, but of course actually it would be hypocritical if we don't lead by example, which we do. So City has right now actually operating one of the largest electric bus fleets in North America. We also have electric streetcars and electric subways. So once the buses are electric, actually it'll be 100% electric transit system. And we lead actually by doing net zero facilities now ahead of our deadline of 2028 for the city as a whole. So what the larger idea here, and obviously we'll get to wastewater in a second, but what we're trying to do actually is we're trying to leverage existing public assets, driving innovation towards reducing emissions. So Toronto actually has been doing this for over 20 years. In 2003, we tapped actually the municipal drinking water system as a source actually of cooling in buildings. It supplies over 100 of the most iconic buildings in downtown Toronto with cold water, no heat pump required. So it saves in the order of 90% of energy and water, because there's no evaporative cooling towers required. And now just this year actually we've expanded it, and we'll continue to expand it actually in the coming years to reach triple, double the capacity that we have. You may think of Toronto as a northern jurisdiction, and we are, but our climate actually is very energy intensive. We have very cold summers and very cold winters and very hot summers. So then when it comes to wastewater energy, we have a program, which I'll tell you about in a second, actually, but we have essentially currently under construction what we think is the largest wastewater energy project in the world. The project actually partner is Noventa Energy, which is a energy company focused strictly on wastewater, headquartered actually in Toronto. This is the one where we're decarbonizing essentially the entire hospital by displacing fossil fuel use from renewable energy from sewers. So this is what the area looks like right now. Across the street on city land, this is a public library and parks and so on. You can see this hole here, and that's essentially a wet well that goes 60 feet down to interface with one of Toronto's largest trunk sewers that serves about 1 million people, 1 million households. This is what the hole looks like. You can tell from the scale that it's a massive civil infrastructure. And then what it will do actually when it's operational next year, again, it will actually displace 90% of natural gas that is used to heat buildings in the hospital campus during the winter, and there'll be actually expansion of the system to serve new buildings in the campus. So that's the project, and we do have a program, given that to move the needle to actually reduce emissions, like we have to by 2040 reduce all emissions. We want to actually do this as a program, so we're trying to actually do 20, 30, 40 of these projects. So we have a wastewater energy program. The way it works actually is starts with a self-serve map where you can plug in the address, in this case, the address of the hospital. It'll give you actually data on all of the wastewater resources, closest to the hospital. And of course, proximity to the resource actually is number one in terms of economics. There's information here around liters per second, available megawatts, equivalent megawatts of capacity. And then once actually the wastewater is screened in this case, given that the hospital actually is here and is so close to the resource, then what we do actually is we go through an approval process. And then to give you a sense actually of how much wastewater energy we have in Toronto, we modeled all of the sewer networks, and these are the trunk sewers, the very large sewers. Red means more energy as the sewer connects to the 3 wastewater plants that we have, one in Humber River, one in Asbridges Bay, actually, and one in the east part of the city. So this is equivalent to about 300 megawatts that we can harvest, which would be 20 or 30 projects that we could decarbonize large hospitals and universities and government buildings. So in summary, the concept here actually is for climate action. We would like to, and we are leveraging municipal assets, drinking water on the case for deep lake cold water to cool buildings, and wastewater or sewers in the case of the hospital to displace natural gas. And the premise really actually is that cities, municipalities control numerous assets. So we've got streets, property, buildings, water and wastewater infrastructure. But we also have soft assets like mapping, information, data sets. And we're stewards of these assets, right? So the question is, which ones do we make available and for what purpose and so on? The other role that we play actually beyond making the infrastructure available actually is that we help, again, like in this case of the hospital, to go from 0 projects to 1, to the first one. So that requires heavy lifting and innovation to get that going. And then we typically put a program together to go from the 1 to the many. And then delivery models actually, there's a bit of a choice to be made, or 2 extremes. In the case of deep lake water cooling, it was done through a then-owned municipal agency. And so it was what we call a direct delivery method. The infrastructure was, financed, constructed, operated by a state department, basically. Since that infrastructure, that company actually has been spun off, and the city has realized, tremendous value from that. But in the case of wastewater, actually, we play actually a minimalist role, where we are the enabler and the host. So we provide access to the sewers at no risk to the city, no financial investment, but we levy fees on the energy transfer. And we do cost recovery to be budget neutral. And we believe that this enabler host model will allow us to scale much faster. So there's other actually options, other city assets that we're looking to, that we are actually leveraging as well. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. That's my contact information if you have if you'd like to contact me later, and I know we're going to do questions. So thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Fernando. And you and I have talked about this before, but I'm going to jump right in with a question because with Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, we just had our annual meeting in the city of Toronto. And so we had a conversation about this. Fernando, you've talked a lot about leveraging city assets for climate action. And I'm curious, given that my work at CNCA is in communications and engagement, I'm the director of engagement. I'm constantly thinking about the public interface and how do we build the public and political will for this work. You mentioned it, you alluded to it in your presentation, but I'm wondering if you can just take a minute to talk about how you're messaging this to the greater Toronto, both public and private sector, so that there's more buy-in. I know that you all are using the hospital as a conversation starter. So if you could just speak to how you're in this moment to spur further similar action.
Yeah. No, excellent question, Michael. So, wastewater at this scale, and we're starting at a big scale for economic reasons. So we're not connecting, obviously, low density or homes, maybe in the future, but right now we're going after, very large trunk sewers. So it turns to be actually government to government, government to business right now. In terms of the opportunity, the projects, the financing, the legal agreements and so on. But you make a good point, actually. So we'll have actually a local TV crew do a live, show in early December as part actually of our climate action communication, because this is actually, again, we're the stewards of this infrastructure, but it's not really ours. It's paid for by Torontonians, through their water bill, right? So we're conscious of that, and we want to tell the story, what's happening in Toronto, that, we are trying to innovate, and do it in a way actually that represents, almost zero risk to residents and their water system. So we're trying to actually basically spread the word. We have full support from our council. We have full support from industry. Customers actually are lining up. So this is a very successful program. And in a very tough, budget year like we have this year, it's wonderful and music to, our mayor and our senior management's ear when we say that this does not put any pressure. In fact, actually, there's a small revenue potential that can cover, for the costs of running the program and some diligence and contracting and legal fees. So I think this is, what we're about. And so we're going to be spreading the word very shortly.
Yeah, this is very exciting. When we were in Toronto for the CNCA annual meeting, your colleagues were talking about the cultural sea change that's happening. You mentioned just now customers lining up. And so that's just illustrative of the sea change that is happening within the city of Toronto. And I'm keen to follow this story, and some of the private sector partners, Naventa and others on LinkedIn, were sharing this salon in advance, saying how exciting this is. So I'm excited to see the story evolve over time as you build it out. Let's take a little time for any further questions, either from panelists or from anyone else. Any other questions for Fernando based on what Toronto is doing?
Maybe while people are thinking about questions, Michael, I should say, I should also not forget, the economic development potential here, given that Naventa Energy Partners, the main wastewater-focused energy company, which is doing work, in North America and worldwide, it's actually headquartered in Toronto. So they've hired, they've actually increased obviously their size, and what we are doing in Toronto actually will travel. This is a company actually that it's doing work throughout the United States, the UK and other places.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, as we think about scalability and replicability in other environments. Fernando, thank you so much. And for the presenters, if you're able to share later with me your presentations, if not, that's fine too. But if you are, we can make those public as well. All right, let's jump over to Vancouver with Derek, Manager of Neighborhood Energy Utility at the City of Vancouver. And Vancouver gets to brag the first North American application of raw sewage heat recovery back in 2010. Thank you for your leadership all the way back then. Derek, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Really interesting presentation, Fernando. I definitely want to pick your brain on a few things outside of this. So thanks for that. And hopefully I can follow up with something equally as impressive here. So today I'll be presenting on the City of Vancouver's neighborhood energy utility, where, as Michael mentioned, we've been heating up a neighborhood using waste heat from sewage for over a decade now, and we're also in the midst of a major expansion of our sewage heat recovery facility. So I'll share updates on those. But to start things off, this is the challenge that we're all facing. We need to decarbonize. The city of Vancouver has some very aggressive targets. We're looking to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. And when we look at where emissions come from a city, the one thing that always stands out for me is just how much buildings contribute to our greenhouse gas emission portfolio, representing 55% of the city of Vancouver's emissions. And so this is really why the neighborhood energy utility exists. It's one of the tools that we have for tackling this challenge of moving to a more sustainable path for heating our homes. Quick overview: the neighborhood energy utility has been in operation since 2010. It is a city-owned and operated thermal energy utility, supplying low carbon space heating and hot water to an area within Vancouver. We operate it as though it's a commercial utility, so our rates are designed to recover all of the costs of the utility and a modest return on the city's investment. Currently, we target to deliver 70% of our energy from renewable sources. And we, as part of the city's climate emergency action plan, we have a goal to work on transitioning that to 100% renewable energy by 2030. And as Michael mentioned, our claim to fame is that this was the first North American application of raw sewage heat recovery. And so here's a schematic of our district energy system, which would be considered a medium temperature system, which means we supply hot water that ranges between 65 and 95 degrees Celsius from our energy center to buildings where they then take heat out of our distribution loop. They use that for space heating and domestic hot water. Cool water comes back to our plant and we just heat it up all over again. And so what we've done is we've built our energy center on top of a sewage pumping station. Sewage is warm because we all take hot showers and run the dishwasher, and there's so much thermal energy stored within sewage and enough there for us to literally heat up a neighborhood. So we take some of the heat out of the sewage before it gets pumped onto the wastewater treatment plant. And we just send that heat right back to the buildings all over again. So a really nice energy cycle, working towards closing the loop there. This is how it all started. And so what we're looking at here is 9 cranes, frantically trying to construct the 2010 Winter Olympic Village in time for the games there, which they were successful. But those were the first 9 buildings connected to the neighborhood energy utility. When I look at this, I really see sort of the perfect conditions for establishing a district energy system. All that's missing is, where is that low carbon energy source going to come from? And we found it just at the edge here in the form of a sewage pumping station, where we realized just how much waste heat was flowing through that pumping station. This is where we are today. And so in red, these are buildings that are connected to the system. So it's expanded a lot since 2010. We've now got 46 buildings connected to the system. The majority of our energy is coming from the False Creek Energy Center, where we have a 3 megawatt sewage heat recovery plant. We're in the process of adding an additional 6.6 megawatts of sewage heat recovery capacity. And I'll talk a bit more about that on the next slides. And then we use natural gas for peaking and backup. We have one customer that's using waste heat from their cooling system and injecting that into the thermal grid. And then we've got a satellite peaking plant to support system resiliency. In blue there, those are buildings that we plan to connect as they redevelop. So lots of growth on the horizon as well. Here's a picture of our existing sewage heat recovery system. It doesn't look like much, but a huge successful engineering endeavor here. And so I'll just walk you through it quickly. Like in green here, this is sewage that flows into this vessel here, which is called the evaporator. Inside here, the warmth of the sewage causes refrigerant to vaporize, and then we run a compressor to bring up the temperature of that refrigerant. And so in that sort of one step, you take a very low grade energy source of lukewarm sewage and you convert it into a high temperature refrigerant, which then gets transferred to this vessel next to it. And that's where the heat from the refrigerant gets put into our system water. And so we can produce water as high as 80 degrees Celsius off of that heat pump. And what's so exciting about sewage heat recovery is just the efficiency that it operates at. So here's a slide showing our numbers from 2022. I'll kind of direct the focus to the efficiency of the system, where on average we saw 330% efficiency. So for 1 unit of electricity to run the compressor and the heat pump, we saw 3.3 units of thermal energy out. The other thing that's really exciting about sewage heat recovery is that even on the coldest days of the year, sewage stays relatively consistently warm, and so the efficiencies of the heat pump remain over 300% even on those minus 10 degrees days. So you make really efficient use of the electric grid, and that's something that's becoming more and more prominent in the conversation. And so just moving on to our expansion project. So we're at the phase now in the build out of the system where we're ready to deploy the next phase of sewage heat recovery. And so we're in the process of adding another 6.6 megawatts. So that'll more than triple the capacity that we have today. Here's a schematic of the plant, and basically what you're looking at is a sewage pumping station. So sewage flows into what's called the wet well here. In the dry side, we have pumps that pump it off to the wastewater treatment plant. We of course take some of that sewage and extract the heat out of it through this heat pump. Here's the project area that we have to work with. Someone had the foresight to plan for system expansion. And so for 10 years, I've been showing a big empty space that one day will get filled. And I can tell you this picture is now out of date. It's a very full room. We had 2 new heat pumps lowered into the energy center earlier this year, and work is now underway to get it connected. We had to bypass the sewage pumping station to do some key tie-ins. We're also adding shark sewage filtration systems to pre-treat the sewage before it comes into our plant and through our heat pumps. And so, yeah, lots of work going on, but we're looking to commission that in 2024, which will give a really nice boost to our low carbon energy security. And just to close out, really, one thing that's been really rewarding is just seeing how much district energy has evolved in greater Vancouver area. And so this sort of helps illustrate that. Back in 2010, when the NEU was established, there were a couple of existing systems, but they were all using almost exclusively natural gas. And so we really wanted to demonstrate district energy as a platform for decarbonization. Here we are today, and what you're seeing is first, the existing systems have been decarbonizing, fuel switching off of gas, using a wide range of different energy sources. You also see just an explosion of systems being created, and most rewarding for us, the systems with an asterisk next to them. These are systems that have selected sewage heat recovery as their primary source of low carbon energy. And it really just shows how much things have changed since 2010, when the technology did not exist in North America, to today, when multiple systems just in the greater Vancouver area are going with sewage heat recovery as their energy source. So that's the end of my presentation, and thanks for the time today. I'll stop sharing there.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek. And both you and Fernando have some great visuals and data in your slides, which is why I'm interested in sharing those images, those visuals, those data out later, if you're willing to share those following this salon conversation. Curious, same question to you that I posed to Fernando. How is your team, how is the city sharing out this story across the city? Is that part of the agenda to get people bought into and knowing about and familiar with these systems? Or is the strategy, let's just scale it up, which is how you ended the presentation, which it's impressive scale, and just to get the good work done? And frankly, it doesn't really matter because city votes or budgets won't malign any of this agenda. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's really important to us is really trying to leverage the utility as sort of an education hub, and so we entertain plant tours, and we share information, and like that's where I think we can really leverage what we're doing. Like the local emissions are great, but if we can help chart a path forward and enable others to make confident investments in low carbon energy, that's where we can have the much bigger impact. And you kind of saw a bit of that in those last slides there, where we've helped to demonstrate that this is a technology that works, and it can work well under the right conditions. We've ironed out some of the kinks along the way, and so that to me is the focus. I'd love to do more with helping share the story, but for me, it's really about trying to use it and promote it for those that are interested to learn from it.
Yeah, and I was so interested in starting our Salon series with this conversation because I think it's such an interesting story, and I think it can appeal to so many types of people, and especially in North America, where politics often gets in the way of good climate action and climate policy. This is a story about efficiency and recovery and smart conservation. So making use of municipal assets, making use of energy that would otherwise be wasted. So there are just so many great, from my perspective, narratives and stories that can come out of this work that can appeal to all types in a given community.
Yeah, even just revisiting, how we think about waste streams, and it doesn't have to be sewage. There's waste heat all around us, and so finding a way to turn those into resources, I think is really a big message in what we're doing here. Is let's be creative and look a little bit broader than just the business as usual. But thanks, Michael.
Yeah, agreed. And great point to finish on. Any other questions for Derek?
Actually, I could point out one thing to both Derek and Fernando. Very impressive stuff which you are presenting here. And when you are, I would say that when you are assuming you will be scaling up big time, I would advise you to get the water utility on board as early as possible, because when you will scale up in large scale, eventually you will be affecting the inlet wastewater temperature at the treatment plant, and especially if your treatment plant is doing nitrogen removal, and if they are already short on capacity, they're gonna be jealous about that heat. They're not going to want you to take it away from them, because the cooler the wastewater, the more difficult it is to treat it properly. And like this is something that you need to get the water utility on board early enough, so that you won't run into any trouble when there will be some heated discussion that. And then you're gonna have to fight for the heat. So you better be like out there early to get everybody on the same side.
I like your double entendre of heated discussion. Thanks, Kristian, for that. Fernando and Derek, you want to respond to
Sure. Kristian, you make an excellent point, actually. And in fact, actually, that was objection number one. So when we approached actually the utility, I should say actually that Toronto actually owns the water utility, Toronto Water.
Okay.
And we also control sewers, trunk sewers, large sewers. It's one tier municipality. We own the whole thing. So it made it a little bit easier. And we also had the experience actually with doing the deep cooling. So on the water side, but essentially, and I think we talked to Vancouver, we talked to other folks that had gone through this, and we had to do some major modeling up front.
Okay.
So the bargain was, or the negotiation was, that we were going to start with like the largest trunk sewers, and then we would monitor, but not only monitor for impact to wastewater treatment plant, but also actually if we want to do more projects, to ensure actually that we weren't taking away sort of upstream energy, that we can manage the resource. And the resource obviously varies a little bit, especially in our climate, between the summer and winter. And the other issue is that in the downtown where the hospital is, it's a combined sewer, so it also gets snow melt and it gets actually precipitation. So there is a variability. So yeah, no, I think it's a great sort of thing to point out, and likely actually it's probably the number one thing, or the first thing that in a discussion when you approach utility.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fernando. Derek, Ivan, did you want to weigh in on Kristian's comment?
Yeah, it's definitely a good comment. Here in Greater Vancouver, our regional body that oversees wastewater treatment is aware of what you're describing. They're very supportive of these types of projects. The scale currently is not one that's impacting any of their treatment processes, but so they're supporting and promoting the use of it, but they're also conscious that there could be a tipping point where it starts impacting, and so they have developed some processes to I guess check against that before projects get approved, and so yeah, thankfully some work and thought has gone into that. At this stage, it's not a concern, but I can totally appreciate where you're coming from, that at some point it could actually start impacting wastewater treatment.
Thanks, Kristian, for that comment. Any other questions for Vancouver, for Derek specifically? And if not, or if they come up later, feel free to put them in chat. Kristian, let's go to you, Director of Wastewater Services with the City of Helsinki, talking about wastewater and sludge recovered and utilized at city scale. So over to you.
Right, thank you. I'll try to share my screen. There, you should now see the presentation.
Yes, we see it.
All right. So I'm speaking from the, let's say, on a citywide scale, but from the water utility point of view. I'm the department director of wastewater treatment at the Helsinki metropolitan area. I'll probably be hopping over some of my slides and try to concentrate on the citywide scale questions. Just to put you in perspective, a few words about my employer. HSY is a municipal federation providing water supply, sewerage, and waste management services for the Helsinki metropolitan area, which comprises about a population of about 1.1 million. 100% publicly funded, and in line with the city of Helsinki, we aim to be 100% carbon neutral by year 2030. And this is a map of the greater Helsinki region. Helsinki proper is the municipality here, and then the rest around it are neighboring municipalities. All these municipalities are served by 2 wastewater treatment plants. One is the Viikinmäki plant over here, the other one is Blominmäki over here. The treated wastewater from both treatment plants is transported through a rock tunnel carved in bedrock, discharged to the Baltic Sea at a distance about 8 kilometers from the shore. At the beginning of these discharge tunnels, there are 2 heat pump plants owned and operated by local energy companies. And these are fairly big plants. I'll show you some data about them shortly. But so we are recovering heat from treated wastewater and not raw sewage. This is what our wastewater treatment plants mostly look like. Up here in the Nordic capitals, we like to build them inside bedrock. Just short words, two treatment plants, one dimension for a population equivalent to 1 million, the other for 400,000. For those of you who know about wastewater treatment, our the treatment process at both treatment plants is essentially activated sludge and anaerobic digestion for sludge treatment. And the energy at the treatment plants, our main energy source is biogas, which we get from anaerobic digestion of waste sludge. And waste sludge is waste sludge is produced in the wastewater treatment process as a byproduct, which needs to be treated one way or another. We use anaerobic digestion, which basically converts the organics of the sludge into biogas. And we use the biogas 100% by ourselves. The main method of biogas usage is through these biogas-powered CHP engines, which we have on both of our treatment plants. That produces most of the energy which we use at the treatment plants. Then we have some additional methods for extracting more energy. One is these ORC exhaust gas turbines, which are connected to the CHP engines. We have solar panels on top of both our treatment plants and pumping stations, a small water turbine in the effluent discharge. And as a whole, the Viikinmäki plant, the bigger one, is more than 90% self-sufficient in energy. Blominmäki, the newer one, is approximately 70% as the design figure. As for heat, both plants are actually more than 100% self-sufficient. We have heat recovery from various flows in several points from the treatment process. Basically, most of the heat comes, however, from the CHP engines, and also during winter time, if the CHPs don't produce enough heat, then we can use biogas fuel boilers. About heat recovery from treated wastewater. So there are 2 heat pump plants, which I just showed you on the map, and they recover actually both heat and cold from treated wastewater. So in Helsinki there is a district heating network and district cooling network, and in the neighboring municipalities there is only district heating network. The biggest plant and the oldest one is the Katrivala heat pump plant, which is utilizing extracting heat from the discharge from our main plant, Viikinmäki plant. The production potential for heating is 126 megawatts and 80 megawatts for cooling, which basically means that it takes care of 7% of district heating of the city of Helsinki and actually 90% of district cooling. And this Helen Ltd, which is a local energy company, at the moment they are designing a new heat pump plant, which will utilize the same wastewater flow, which has already been utilized at the Katrivala plant, but they have calculated that it is still feasible to build another one after that, with another 90 megawatts of heating potential and 60 megawatts of cooling potential. And then in the western area, there is the Suomenoja heat pump plant owned by Fortum Ltd, which has 60 megawatt heating potential. So this is like this is like our citywide scale heat recovery, and a few words about how we are trying to go towards carbon neutrality. Optimizing the energy balance and climate impact of our wastewater treatment plants is a top priority for us. And actually our main target at the moment is not that much energy efficiency, but nitrous oxide emissions, because the energy production of HSY, or energy production of wastewater treatment and actually also water treatment in the Helsinki water utility is basically totally decoupled from carbon. All energy which we purchase from outside is comes from renewable sources, and most of the energy which we utilize we make ourselves. So that means that the nitrous oxide emissions are actually the main our main source of climate emissions, and we are doing a lot of work to mitigate those. And we are all the time trying to optimize our energy balance. We have an optimization engine which is built up in our for example, we have this optimization feature which is built up into our automation system, which is continuously checking the spot prices of electricity on the market, and based on the fact that whether the electricity on the market is cheap or expensive, it's like controlling our own energy production and energy consumption, which basically in a sense it means that when electricity on the market is cheap, we are buying electricity in and filling up our biogas storage. When electricity on the market is expensive, then we are running our CHP engines on full speed, making over 100% self-sufficiency. And this is something which we actually created in late year 2022 when electricity prices skyrocketed, and it didn't actually require. It's a prime example of an innovation which was forced by ad hoc circumstances. It did not require any investments, but it required just a little bit of innovation. And yep, that's pretty much it. Just short. This is a graphical presentation of the energy balance of the Viikinmäki wastewater treatment plant. So we have 4 different sources of energy. We can buy electricity from the market. We have solar panels. The most important one's biogas. Then we can recover heat from air and sludge. We have energy generation, CHP engines, the most important ones, producing electricity and heat. ORC, exhaust gas turbines, producing electricity, gas power boilers, and heat recovery from the plant internal flows. We use the energy both at the wastewater treatment plant. Most of it is used at the wastewater treatment plant, and then we continuously direct some of the heat and electricity which we produce to the neighboring drinking water treatment plant. And if there is surplus after all this, we can also sell the rest to the market. That is basically what I had to say. So
excellent. Thank you, Kristian.
Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. And I recognize some of those photos because we had our Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance annual meeting in Helsinki before COVID, and many of us got to go down into that bedrock and check out exactly what you showed us, and that was a great.
Okay, well then you know what it looks like.
Yeah, it was a great experience for all of us to be underground and seeing what you've built out. It's very impressive. Questions for Kristian from any of the panelists or guests?
Sure, Michael. Yeah, Kristian, great. Thank you for the presentation. And quick question, actually. Yeah, it's impressive, actually. Just to confirm, actually. So you're saying that there's no fossil fuel use actually in the running of the wastewater plants?
No, not at all.
That's very impressive, actually. And maybe we can do a sidebar. Would like to actually know a little bit more about your energy consumption, per water per liter treated and so on. Wondering if doing it underground in the bedrock, as opposed to in North America, obviously we have more land availability. We do it above ground, especially in the winter and so on. We tend to use actually a lot of natural gas to heat the sewage in the winter. Mm-hmm. So yeah, wouldn't mind actually sort of comparing notes with you, because that's really where we want to go. We like to actually have continuity of we use biogas, but it's not fully replacing the natural gas use. So I'm wondering if it's more of a energy efficiency perspective, being in the underground in the rock. But yeah, it's great presentation.
Yeah. Well, let's say that actually being underground doesn't affect doesn't have that big an effect on the energy consumption as you might think. This is most of the treatment plants in Finland are above ground, and so we are still kind of a special case. There are a handful of these underground plants in Finland, and another handful in Sweden and Norway. But I think the energy efficiency is more than the fact that we're underground. It's rather it has to do with I think rather it has to do with like trying to optimize, trying to choose optimally dimensioned equipment. Like our main equipment which produce electricity, which our main electricity consumers, our main heat consumers are so let's say the main electricity consumers are obviously our aeration blowers and inlet pumps, and they have been dimensioned very carefully, and there's also we have done a lot of work in optimizing their operation. So that is probably that. And then another thing is that we are trying to do, as for the heat, we do, as I said, we are doing heat recovery from many plant internal waste streams. So we'll try to be as economical as possible with the heat. So I think I think these things matter more than the fact that we are underground.
Right, very impressive. Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Fernando. Other questions for Kristian? Okay, well, this was great. I certainly learned a lot in it. So thank you so much to Fernando from Toronto, Derek from Vancouver, and Kristian from Helsinki for all your inputs. And I look forward to receiving your presentation so I can share out some of those visuals, if you'll permit me, on social, because they are great stories to tell too. Thanks to everyone else for joining this conversation. For more on the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, please check us out at carbonneutralcities.org. We have another salon coming up in a couple of weeks on community engagement strategies, featuring some of our cities as well. We're thrilled with this kind of leadership coming out of Toronto, Vancouver, and Helsinki, and look forward to seeing more of it. And again, panelists, thank you. Really appreciate your time today. And to everyone else who joined, thanks so much for being with us. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great day and have a great week.
Very good. Thank
Thanks,
you, everybody.
Michael.
Very good.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.